Hello, and welcome to my final Bible study um, of the year. I am recording this on December 31st, 2020, the last day of the year. This will also be the last in my video series Bible studies. And I want to think about the new year. Happy New Year to you. It is, we are on the verge of 2021, or maybe it is 2021 when you're watching this video. New year, I want to think about, how and why do we say it's the year 2021? Why do we use those numbers exactly? I mean, you probably know the answer, right? 2021, we're counting back years. If you count it back 2021 years and get to year zero, where would you be? Why do we use that system? Because it's relatively arbitrary. I mean, we could say that, it's the year 245 of United States. And so we could say if 1776 we could say is year one, then today would be somewhere around 240 something or other, and December 31st, something like that, right? But we don't. We say it's 2021. So why do we say that? What happened 2021 years ago? Well, it was the birth of Jesus Christ, or at least reportedly that is why we consider it the year 2021. It's interesting to think about that. And as we just got done thinking about Christmas and celebrating Christmas, the birth of Jesus Christ is so significant that it's the reason why we calculate, it's what we use to calculate time even today, 2,000 years later. And I want to get into that, but before we do that, I want to look actually into the Bible and think about the way that the Bible dates things. Exodus chapter 12 is when the Israelites are being set free from Egypt, being slaves in Egypt, and God gives them instructions on to celebrate Passover. To commemorate this event, Exodus chapter 12 starts off, "The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, 'This month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you.'" So from now on, Passover is going to signify the beginning of the new year, which we know what would have been sometime in March or April, was their beginning of the new year. So from that point on, that's when they, as Israelites, were going to celebrate the new year. And from that point on, they're going to look back and remember that event. So thereby it essentially becomes their year zero. And they calculate that. And you can see this take root in ancient Israel as you continue the story of the Old Testament. You skip ahead to 1 Kings chapter 6. 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1. Says this. It says, "In the 480th year after the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, he began to build the house of the Lord." So this is the beginning of when Solomon is going to build the temple, and they're dating that based on when Passover was first celebrated back in Exodus chapter 12. They said it was 480 years later, so essentially the year 480 for them at that point in time. But what's interesting is you move from there, and it's shortly after this that Solomon's life ends and the kingdom gets split in two, that they begin to change how they calculate the date. And you can see this, for example, throughout really 1st and 2nd Kings, but 1 Kings chapter 15, 1 Kings 15 verse 1, now all of a sudden they've switched again. And it says, "In the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, Abijah began to reign over Judah." So they're calculating this guy whose name is Abijah begins to reign in the 18th year of King Jeroboam's reign. So now they're dating things based on the reign of kings, and you can see this kind of continue on, chapter 15, verse 25. Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Israel in the second year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. This kind of system of keeping dates continues on as they base the calculated year on who is king. Chapter 16, verse 8, another example. The 26th year of Asa, king of Judah, Eliah, the son of Baasha, began to reign over Israel in Tisra. All right, so they're calculating things based on who is king, based on whether you're in the northern kingdom or southern kingdom. Other examples, we see this kind of continuing, but other examples would be like, for example, Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel in chapter 1, verse 1, talks about the beginning of Ezekiel's life, or at least his ministry. And it says, in the 30th year, in the 4th month of the 5th day of the month, as I was among the exiles by the Shebar Canal, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God on the 5th day of the month. It was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiachin. All right, so now he's talking about them being in exile, which is after the kings that have reigned already, and dating things based on that. Another example might be the prophet Amos, and you can see this in Amos chapter 1, verse 1, as they describe when Amos is writing his account in his book, and it says, the words of Amos, who was among the shepherds of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and the days of Jeroboam, son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. And so there you actually have them dating based on a significant geological event, right? Some big earthquake that took place is when they're dating it. And then as you get into later, which is after the exile and the Israelites are allowed to return, they begin to date. Similarly, Ezra, for example, Ezra 1, verse 1, which is the account of the Israelites being allowed back into their homeland after the exile. Verse 1, in the 1st year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, and he made a proclamation throughout the land. So they're dating things based on, again, who is the king, even though they're in a pagan land. So this is kind of the way that it is. You can see that they're taking a year and they're finding some kind of significant event that took place in the past by which to help calculate the current date. And we see this idea kind of passed into the New Testament. For example, the book of Luke. The book of Luke, chapter 3. Luke 3:1 has a similar way of describing things. It says, in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judah, and Herod being tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother Philip, tetrarch of the region of and it continues on there. Again, it's calculating the date based on who is in charge at that time. And that's basically the old way of saying, hey, it's today. I'm writing this on December 31st, 2020, but instead of using those numbers, they use who's in charge of that region at that time. Okay, and this was pretty common, and you had basically every region, every part of the world using their own system, and there wasn't really one universal system of calculating the year until we get to the year roughly about the 5th century. 500 years after Jesus is when a guy named Dionysius comes on the scene. And Dionysius Exiguus, who was a Scythian who came from Rome toward the end of the 5th century. And he's the one who first decided and calculated when Jesus was born, or at least tried to. He introduced a system of dating based on the Christian era, beginning with the incarnation, which is Jesus' birth, instead of the secular method according to the councils of Rome and the empire of Diocletian. So he's talking about how this is kind of a new thing that this man Dionysius is coming up with, and saying, let's calculate our time based on the birth of Jesus instead of the way that Rome had been doing it at the time. And then it goes, we know that unfortunately for Dionysius that he actually miscalculated a little bit. And we later will come to learn that actually he didn't calculate Jesus' birth at 0. Jesus was actually born according to his own calendar on about 5 or 6 BC. But nevertheless, it remains true that the calendar that we use was intended to be based on Jesus's birth. And that, of course, didn't connect with everybody right away when this Dionysius first introduced it. It took time. That over time, through all these various countries and cultures, had their own system of dating, that they found it maybe more helpful to connect and use the same calendar with dating. And so they eventually kind of came to a consensus and said, you know what, let's go with this version that Dionysius came up with. And over time, more and more parts of the world began to agree and use this dating system initiated by Dionysius. And that is what we, even to this day, still use, what we call the BC AD calendar. And that's what the majority of the world today uses. BC referring to before Christ, and AD referring to Anno Domini, which is Latin for the year of our Lord. In other words, the years following Jesus's birth. And it's significant to think about that. I mean, today, here we are looking at 2021. And why is it 2021? Well, it's because Jesus' birth. Jesus left such a mark on history that we still acknowledge it every time you write the date. No, I'm very well aware that although the majority of the world uses this system of dating today, that's not true everywhere. There are certain cultures that do not use it. The Jewish culture still considers the year today would be 5781, and they're calculating that based on the beginning of the world. According to Genesis, they calculate it from that point in time. And even the Islamic cultures today, many of them actually are using a different calendar, and they consider it to be the year 1300 or 1400, somewhere around there. They're about 600 years off from the rest of the world because they use their dating of when Muhammad was alive. Yet, nevertheless, even the Jewish cultures and the Islamic cultures still acknowledge that the majority of the world uses the date of 2020 or 2021 because they realize they're kind of on the outside of the majority of the world, which uses this calendar system. And so I think what that's really strikes me about this is just the fact that it's such a testimony to Jesus that we use this system of 2,000 years ago, and we still use the way of dating to testify to Jesus. And I guess that's something to think about as we celebrate a new year. Again, is the incredible momentum that Jesus started and continues to be evident in the simple thing of dating. That Jesus literally split time. The system of time that we use literally revolves around Jesus, and it speaks to his significance in the world and his impact on the world that really is unparalleled, whether by any other religion or any other culture. And that's to speak of the fact that Jesus is for all people. Again, as we've seen it again and again, Jesus truly is for all people, and it's evident in the fact that the majority of the world uses the dating system based on his life. And so that's a good word, something to encourage you in your faith, that this is a real faith, that Christians didn't just make up their religion, that it's grounded in real history, and the proof of that is in the fact that we are turning the calendar and saying it's the year 2021 based on Jesus' birth. So that's a good word again for us today, a little bit of a history lesson for us. And I do hope you have a happy new year. Thanks for tuning in and spending these some time with me today. God bless you, and we'll see you again soon.